What is going on, everybody? It's your boy Clint. This is odds.com, and this is Total Madness, this week's episode for UFC Vegas 13, Teixeira versus Santos. Thank you very much for hanging out with us here at odds.com. If you are on YouTube, make sure you give this video a thumbs up. Give me a comment down below. Let me know what your favorite total for Saturday's MMA card is gonna be. If you're over here on odds.com, thank you very much. We appreciate your support. Let's dive on into this week. So the very first fight on the card that we have listed here, these are probably going to be out of order because I'm using bestfightodds.com for the most current and up-to-date odds and totals. This one doesn't have one yet. We've got Gustavo Lopez taking on Anthony Meerschaert. Now, Meerschaert is a short notice replacement for Lopez, which is why there's no total out there at this point. However, they do have fight goes to decision at plus 125. Fight does not go to decision at minus 165, which means they're not expecting this one to go the distance. I would anticipate that this total probably comes out at about a pick'em at the 2.5 mark. We might even get a 1.5 that's juiced to the over, depending on what they decide they want to do here. This one's extremely interesting because Meerschaert is a submission specialist. We know that Gustavo has heavy, fast hands, but he's pretty solid at counter wrestling, staying on the feet, that kind of thing. I would be looking at over on this one. I feel like Gustavo can keep this thing on the feet. On the feet, he probably has Meerschaert a little bit outgunned, but I'm not sure that he'll be able to put Meerschaert down. And Meerschaert's been off for a while. He may have made some improvements. Perhaps he can survive on the feet. That's not one that I'm really planning on betting, simply because we have so many questions. And with the short notice replacement, it really throws a wrench into things, and I don't have a very good read on it. We've got Darren Elkins taking on Eduardo Grigori. We've got a total set at 2.5 on this one. Over 2.5 is minus 155. Under 2.5 is plus 135. I would be extremely tempted to bet the under on this one. I'm looking very closely at this fight. So Darren the Damage Elkins has everything. He's a well-rounded fighter. He's fought some of the best guys in the division, and he's had a bit of a rough road lately. This seems almost like a layup from the UFC. Eduardo Grigori on the other side of this thing is a very, very competent striker, very dangerous on the feet. However, he's extremely exposable when it hits the floor. So I think there's a very clear possibility of Darren Elkins landing a ground and pound TKO or a submission if he utilizes his wrestling in this fight, or if it does stay on the feet, if he decides he wants to play a little bit. Grigori has bombs. He can absolutely crack what's left of the chin of Darren the Damage Elkins. I think the under 2.5 here at plus money is a half-decent bet, and I'm looking very closely at making that play myself. Khalid Taha taking on Hani Barcelos. We've got the total set once again at 2.5, and I do want to remind everybody this is the UFC Apex. We are in the small cage, which we know causes actions. We've got the under 2.5 juiced ever so slightly, minus 120. The over 2.5 at plus 100. Now, Khalid Taha is a guy that can knock anybody out. He's got raw, furious power. We also know that Hani Barcelos is a guy who's got a sick, legitimate Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, very, very high level on the mat, and his striking has come a long way itself. Now, crazy enough, this is a spot where normally, y'all know, I like it when two fighters can contribute to my under. I like to bet the unders. I like to bet on violence. This is one that I'm probably going to stay away from because of how close the line is here, because as much as both these guys can contribute to the under, I actually feel like this one may squeeze over. We know Khalid Taha has some gas tank issues. We know he's got a wrestling deficiency. And we know that Hani Barcelos is not afraid of grappling his opponents and just doing what he needs to do to get a decision. Hani Barcelos is not going to be as big as Taha's opponents that have been able to really, expose that ground game. He is better in jiu-jitsu, but it might take everything he's got just to keep Taha down. Now, if Taha does gas out, or if Barcelos gasses out, then the other one definitely has the opportunity to finish the fight. But I personally think that Hani Barcelos is going to win this fight via decision. I think he's going to grind on Taha and just do what it takes to keep this very dangerous opponent out of sorts until he can make it to the judges' scorecard. So I'd be looking over 2.5 at that plus money. Again, we don't have to bet every single fight. That is the beauty of the bettor's advantage in sports betting. We don't have to do it, and this is one that I'm not necessarily encouraging anybody to bet because it could be very, very hairy right at that 2.5 round mark. Speaking of the over and under 2.5s, I do want to verify. We get a lot of questions about this every single week. Check with your bookie what the rules are. Books vary, bookies vary. You never know what the rules are going to be, so make sure you know what you're betting before you make it. Most American US-based books will have 2.5 be actually marked at the 2-minute and 30-second mark of the round. So an over 1.5 means round 2, 2 minutes, 31 seconds, you cash that over. Other books, however, some overseas books, they have 2.5 rounds, meaning it has to complete the round, which means essentially your fight will have to start round 3, as opposed to you cashing a ticket at the 2-minute and 31-second mark. So just be careful when you place these bets. Make sure you know what you're betting. Make sure you know what your options are and what your book grades as a victory. Max Griffin taking on Ramirez Brahimaj. We've got a total on this one set at 2.5. Again, the under is plus 150. The over is minus 170. Both of these guys are grapplers. Max Griffin is probably going to have an edge in the striking. Brahimaj is a very, very exciting young up-and-coming talent. He's got a 100% finish rate, a 100% submission rate, but he's going up against Max Griffin, who has a 0 next to the amount of times he's been submitted in his entire UFC career. He's also going to be the slightly undersized fighter here in this spot. I think this is a veteran lesson type of situation. I don't know that Brahimaj has what it takes to submit Griffin where the others have failed in the past. He could, especially early on in the fight when everybody's dry, there's not a lot of sweat or anything like that. Both these guys have suspect gas tanks, so both these guys can gas out as the fight continues. I don't hate getting plus money on the under because if Brahimaj is not able to out-grapple Max Griffin, Max could put a beating on him on the feet and might be able to get a TKO victory. However, I'm thinking this thing goes over. Max Griffin is a decision machine. He doesn't finish overly often. Brahimaj's only losses have come by decision. I think we're going to get to the judges' scorecards. So I'm going to pass on this one because I don't want to lay that minus 170, especially when we've got such a dangerous submission artist in Brahimaj that can ruin it for us quick and in a hurry. The next fight up, we've got Sarah Moras taking on Vanessa Melo, and I actually don't see a total on this one. It is a women's fight, however, so I would expect the total to be set at 2.5, and I would expect the total to be juiced heavily to the over, as we normally see. This is the fight on the card that I drew a line through. I want nothing to do with it. Both these women are not UFC caliber, in my opinion. I do like Sarah Moras. I'm a fan of Cheesecake. However, she is not that much better than Vanessa Melo, in my opinion. We just don't know on this fight. Lots of questions, relatively low-level fight. So I'm not expecting a finish from either woman. Both of them go to decision fairly often. Moras does have a couple of finishes, but it's been over very, very breakable UFC competition, whereas Melo has gone to the cards several times already in her UFC career. I'm expecting Moras to get the victory. I'm not expecting a TKO or anything like that, so I would avoid this one completely. Bevan Lewis taking on Trevin Giles. This is the second fight on the card that I drew a line through. This one should be fun to watch, but both of these guys have serious letdown ability. They've both absolutely fallen apart and shit the bed in several previous fights, so it's very, very hard to trust either of them. Now, we do have a total set at 2.5. Over 2.5 is minus 200. Under 2.5 is plus 170. And this is a spot where both fighters definitely can contribute to that under. We've seen Trevin Giles have knockout power. We've seen him ground and pound. We've seen him submit people. We've seen Bevan Lewis be able to clip people on the feet and have knockout power as well. If you wanted to roll the dice on this fight, if you didn't feel comfortable betting anything on this fight except a total, the under at plus 170 is not a bad option. If Trevin Giles is able to get Lewis to the mat, then he absolutely has the opportunity to ground and pound or submit Bevan Lewis. If this fight is stuck on the feet, if it's contested standing, both men have athletic ability and knockout power. This one could get finished. I personally think that it's probably going to squeeze its way to the judges' scorecards, but again, with these two fighters, you simply never know. They're both young, they're both able to make leaps and bounds improvements, and that's kind of the problem, is this is a shot in the dark. We don't know what version of either of these fighters is going to show up Saturday. Anything can happen. The only way I could look is that under 2.5, but I'm probably not going to bet it at all. I wouldn't bet it with your money. We've got Giga Chikadze taking on Jamie Simons, UFC newcomer here. We've got the total set at 1.5. The under 1.5 is plus 100. The over 1.5 is minus 130. Another fight with just a million questions on it. Giga looked better than he ever has in his last fight. Jamie Simons is a UFC newcomer. This fight doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Jamie Simons is a grappler by nature. He sells out for the takedown. All he wants to do is get on top of you and maul you. Once he does get that top position, he's extremely dangerous with ground and pound and submissions, but he's kind of harmless on the feet. He just isn't quite there yet in his stand-up, and that's not the kind of guy you want to be fighting in that circumstance. Giga Chikadze is a world-class striker. We have seen Jamie Simons be knocked out once before. He didn't set a takedown up. He dove in. His opponent was able to time it, threw a knee at him, knocked him out in about 30 seconds. So this one very easily could go under that 1.5 because Giga is just going to be miles and levels ahead of this kid. However, if Simons has any type of success whatsoever, if he plays the range game, if he's all out or all in, he might be able to squeeze you over this 1.5. I actually would be leaning the over 1.5, but another one that I'm just not planning on betting because at any point in time, Giga can unload on this dude, and maybe even the Giga kick to the liver will be the end of this fight very, very early. Alexander Romanov taking on Marcos Rogerio de Lima. This is a fun one. Big ol' heavyweight, boys. I hope you listened to me a little bit earlier in the week. If you have access to totals, not all books put them out early on in the week, but I mentioned that if you like the under 1.5 on this total, which you should like the under 1.5 on this total, you better hit it early. When we talked about that, I want to say it was minus 175, minus 180. It is now minus 210. There's been nothing but love for the under 1.5 on this fight. The over 1.5 is sitting at plus 175 at this point. I couldn't agree more with the movement. Marcos Rogerio de Lima is knockout or bust. He's got to go out there, he's got to touch Romanov on the chin, and he's got to do it right away to have any shot of winning this fight. He has no ground game of note. And Alexander Romanov, King Kong, that's all this guy does is take people down and then smash them into the canvas. We've seen him be able to knock people out. We've seen him be able to submit people. He's a man who can lift full-on heavyweights, 265 pounds over his head and then slam them to the floor. I love him in this spot. I think he's going to win in the very first round. I think he's going to get a ground and pound TKO. That the under 1.5 at minus 210 does allow for Rogerio de Lima to show up and have that kind of inclusion there. And then, of course, we've got 2 minutes and 30 seconds for most books in the second round if he somehow survives round one. So I like this under 1.5. I think it's, parlay piece worthy at minus 200. If you feel like playing it, that's the way to go on that fight. Brendan Allen taking on Ian the Hurricane Heinisch. We've got a total once again set at 2.5. Lots of 2.5s this week. Over 2.5, minus 190. Under 2.5 is plus 165. This is another one where I would be very, very, very tempted on betting the under. I'm looking at it myself because Brendan Allen is a wizard on the mat. Now, Ian Heinisch has only been submitted one time in his entire MMA career, and Brendan Allen is a better submission artist than some of the guys he's fought. Now, recently, Ian Heinisch has fought some high-level Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belts, Antonio Carlos Jr., for example. He's been able to stay safe. He's been able to stay where he needs to be on the mat to not get submitted. However, Allen is far more scrambly than those guys are. He may open up avenues for a submission that some of those fighters did not. I wouldn't be surprised if Allen was able to go ahead and get that elusive submission on Ian Heinisch. Now, Heinisch, on the flip side of this thing, he's been training a lot on his striking. He's been sitting down more on his punches, and he's been knocking out a couple of people very recently. GM3, Gerald Meerschaert, was one of his victims. This is a big step up in competition for Brendan Allen, so he can either come out here, blow the brakes off of Ian, get the submission that no one seems to be able to get, or he could flounder. He could run out of the ability. He could run out of gas, honestly. Ian Heinisch is a massive, massive man and completely muscle-bound, very, very strong. If he's unable to get Heinisch to the ground, he's going to be forced to stand with him, in which case he's going to be at a severe disadvantage. And Heinisch, the way he's been looking, has that power. He's got the ability to get the finish. I would be looking at the under 2.5 here. Plus 165 is not a bad number, because if Allen can't get the takedown, if he can't get an early submission, he's essentially going to have to survive the stand-up with Ian for a full 15 minutes, or he's going to have to wrestle Ian Heinisch and be able to keep him on the floor for a full 2 or so rounds, and that's not something that is easy to do. So if he fails in that effort at any point in time, again, if we're talking American books, you're only worried about that last 2 minutes and 30 seconds of the third round where something could potentially go wrong. I'm thinking this one probably ends inside the distance. Claudia Godelia taking on Yan Xiaonan. This is my favorite fight on this entire card. I'm so excited for this women's matchup here. It's a really, really fun spot. The total, once again, set at 2.5. We've got the under plus 255. The over is minus 130. This is a spot where I would be very, very tempted to go ahead and take that under. Yan Xiaonan sits on her punches. She sets records for output in the women's division. And Claudia Godelia has been showing nothing but a decline lately. She's been rocked in her last 3 or 4 fights. She got rocked by Angela Hill. She got rocked by Carla Esparza. Her chin is going. It's deteriorating. It's definitely on its way out. And Yan Xiaonan is the type of fighter who will be able to take advantage of that. Now, if this fight does get to the floor, Claudia Godelia has a ground and pound, has a submission advantage, but we've seen Claudia Godelia struggle to actually do that with her opponents because her gas tank has been so bad. Honestly, I'm going to go out with my read straight on this one. I've played Yan Xiaonan straight. I think I'm going to sprinkle the KO prop. I'm definitely going to sprinkle Yan Xiaonan in round 3 because I expect Claudia to run out of gas in round 2, and then I think Yan's just going to take over and get the dang thing done. So if you want to maybe have a chance that Claudia Godelia locks up a submission or something like that, protect yourself a little bit, the under 2.5 at plus 255, I don't hate it. I definitely wouldn't be laying 3-1 on this fight to go over. Even though most of these fights for both of these women have squeezed their way over, this is a very dangerous fight for both women, and I can absolutely see one of them or both of them getting some kind of a finish here on Saturday. We've got Andrei Arlovski taking on Tanner Boser, over 2.5, set at minus 135 to the over, plus 115 to the under. This is another spot. We've got a young up-and-coming guy who's been sitting on his punches, who's been finishing people more often than not as of lately. He was a decision machine before that, but he seems to have really evolved, and he's starting to figure things out. Andrei Arlovski getting older. He's 41 years old. He's been rocked in a lot of his fights. He's been able to dig deep, get through it, survive. But that cliff is coming. That 40-year-old fighting cliff is coming. Somebody's going to clip him. Somebody's going to hurt him. That chin will eventually fade and just be done for. Tanner Boser likes to go to the legs. He likes to just piece his opponents up, leg kicks, move, and then be able to blast them once they start thinking about how bad their calves hurt. So this is one that I'm expecting Tanner Boser to win by knockout. He is basically a 2.0 version of Andrei Arlovski. He's got more output, he's got more technical striking, and the fact that he's sitting on his punches and his kicks, he's more dangerous than he has ever been. So I'm fully expecting the finish by Tanner Boser. However, like we talk about, we want that option of both fighters to help us cash in under. Andrei Arlovski, he's not a finisher. He's a decision machine. I feel like this line is actually appropriate for what we're seeing here. Tanner Boser goes to decision a lot. Andrei Arlovski goes to decision always. So the over 2.5 at minus 135, that's kind of a buy low price on some heavyweights that might squeeze over. I'm not going to bet it, however, because like I said, I am expecting Tanner Boser to win this fight by knockout. Plus 115 is just not enough for me. If you're going to look for that route, you can get Tanner Boser by knockout straight. He's plus 160, something like that. I'm not expecting Andrei Arlovski to have any finishing ability in this fight, so I would much rather get the extra price if you're going to play it that way. This is a total that I more than likely will not be touching. Glover Teixeira taking on Thiago Santos. We've got a total set at 1.5 for this main event light heavyweight brawl. 1.5 over is minus 140. 1.5 under is plus 120. The bookmakers are telling you that this thing is going to get into the second half of round 2 more than likely. This is a very interesting fight to me because Thiago Santos is one of the hardest hitters in the division. He was the hardest hitter at 185 until he moved up to 205, and then he went a full 25 minutes with Jon Jones. He was just a little bit outclassed in the striking area there. He's coming off of knee surgeries. We're not sure exactly what he's going to look like, but if Instagram can tell us anything, the dude is in his usual insane shape. I'm expecting a lot from Thiago Santos here. Glover Teixeira is the savviest veteran of all time. He knows how to stay safe, he knows how to survive, and he takes advantage of the mistakes that his opponents make. So what he's been doing lately is he's really settled into this gatekeeper role. Anytime his opponents come in a little too hot, a little too heavy looking for that finish, he turns the tables on them and then finds a way to win himself. This is a fight that I'm fully expecting both men to come out very calculated and slow. First off, Glover is getting older. He's another one of these 40-year-old fighters. Eventually, that cliff is coming. That legendary chin is gonna crack. Eventually, it's going to let people down. I've made a lot of money betting on Glover Teixeira, and I actually really enjoy betting on him as an underdog. You would think 2-1 here would be a just absolute home run spot for me, but Thiago Santos is a different monster. He's so dangerous, he's so explosive, and he keeps a level head. He's not the kind of guy that's going to go for broke and get caught when he gets his opponent ever so slightly rocked. I actually think the fight with Jon Jones and then the combination of his knee injuries, I think he's going to be very slow, measured, and he's going to come out and look for that finish, but he's going to let it come to him. He's going to piece his opponent up. He's going to hurt him and rock him a couple of times, and then when it finally presents itself, he will go for it at that time. The problem is I'm not sure when that's going to happen. I can fully see these two men staring at each other for all of round one. This could be a very, very slow, boring fight for the beginning of this fight because Glover's getting older, Thiago Santos is a monster, and neither of them can afford to lose here. This is potential title challenger, #1 contender eliminator type of fight. So I think they're going to come out slow. I think once Thiago Santos gets a little bit more comfortable, I think once he starts loosening up, he feels like he's back home in there because it's been a long time since he's fought, then he will start to open up. Glover's going to look for the opportunity to counter. Glover's going to look for that hole in the game that he can exploit. Maybe take the fight to the ground if Thiago Santos overextends a little bit too much. But don't forget, Thiago Santos is no stranger to the mat himself. He's got underrated wrestling. He's got underrated jiu-jitsu. So it's not necessarily a game over if Glover gets it to the floor. On top of that, he's probably, again, I say probably because we don't truly know, I believe he's physically stronger than Glover Teixeira is. So I think he will be able to get up if he needs to. So I am very much looking at the over 1.5 in this spot. It's -140. I'm not a huge fan of the price tag, but I don't think this is a one-round fight. Once again, though, I want to go ahead and give a little asterisk here. We don't know what we're going to get here. I think Thiago Santos is going to come out slow. Coming off a long layoff, coming off the loss to the champion in your last fight, you'd think that experience is going to help him, calm it down a little bit. But maybe he has an adrenaline dump. Maybe he has nerves. Maybe he wants to make a statement and reestablish himself as the #1 guy at 205. He could come out here and just go balls to the wall in the very first 60 seconds of this fight. I'm not expecting it, but it very much could happen. This is another very risky fight. I would lean to the over 1.5. I don't know that I'm necessarily planning on betting it. That's Total Madness for UFC Vegas 13, everybody. Thank you so much for all the love and support. We appreciate you here at odds.com. Be sure, once again, share this video out, get the word out. You have a great day, and good luck on all your bets.